In our previous slides, we have gone over evidence-based management. The question we may ask from evidence-based management is this: if something works, does it mean that it is moral? If an action is empirically successful, does it necessarily mean that it is a moral act? If an act is successfully executed, does it mean the actor meets divine approval? Let us now look at the difference between what is empirical, or that which works, versus what is moral, or that which is right. We will briefly go over the definitions of both, beginning with empirical. What is the empirical approach? The empirical approach to life is based on experimentation. It derives from the Greek empirikos, meaning based on observation, experienced. It's based on experimentation, trials, tests, and based on experience. Next, let's define that which is moral. The dictionary defines moral as associated with or characterized by right behavior. Previously, we have gone over what the majority view on morality is. We have discussed what is meant by right behavior. Previously, we explained that Plato and Euthyphro defines what is moral as that which pleases God. What is right is what pleases God in Euthyphro by Plato. The worldview such as this is held by the major religions of the world, but particularly the Abrahamic faith, which is Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Let us take some time now to think about any examples of an empirical evidence-based approach. Maybe someone could think of an example of the empirical approach through history or literature. In the next slide, we will cite a particular example. Let us look at the story of the gentleman and emancipator, Mr. and prophet, judge and ruler Gideon. In the story of Gideon, a test was conducted to verify the veracity and power of a moral injunction or the will of God. In Judges 6, Gideon asks God for a sign. The passage goes so. Then Gideon said to God, "If you are truly going to use me to rescue Israel as you promised, prove it to me in this way. I will put a wool fleece on the threshing floor tonight. If the fleece is wet with dew in the morning, but the ground is dry, then I will know that you are going to help me rescue Israel as you promised." And that is just what happened. When Gideon got up early the next morning, he squeezed the fleece and wrung out a whole bowlful of water. Then Gideon asked God, Please don't be angry with me, but let me make one more request. Let me use the fleece for one more test. This time, let the fleece remain dry while the ground around it is wet with dew. So that night, God did as Gideon asked. The fleece was dry in the morning, but the ground was covered with dew. Herein we see Gideon asked for empirical proof of divine will. Now we may see such behavior exhibited in the modern world, and we may wonder who or what kind of people would argue in favor of empiricism as being over morality in today's world. It is unfortunately some people who argue that a business venture, if it is profitable, is surely moral because profit is empirical evidence of God's support of the venture. They forget that profit is merely an indicator. On top of that, empirical evidence can be provided by both what is holy and unholy, meaning empirical evidence can be provided by that which is good and that which is not good. Moreover, what may seem empirically verifiable and pragmatic in the short term can be both immoral, impractical, and deleterious in the long run. The next example illustrates how the same empirical evidence can be provided by the wholesome and the unwholesome alike. That which works is not necessarily moral, and this was known early on. In theological history, God asks Moses to go to the Pharaoh and ask him to emancipate the Jews. In Exodus, Moses protested. What if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, the Lord never appeared to you? In response, God allows Moses to prove divine approval by granting Moses miracles. In other words, empirical proof of divine approval. Moses would perform miracles to prove he had divine approbation and was asking the Pharaoh to do the right thing. Now, those who know the story know that early miracles for deliverance of the Jews were replicable by the idolatrous clergy. So the oppressors would not emancipate the Jews because the idolaters reasoned that if God is on the side of Moses, then surely he is also on our side because we too can do the same miracles. Now, later, miracles of Moses could not be replicated by the clergy of the Pharaoh, and they even gave up, and the clergy even admitted defeat, saying that surely this miracle that Moses performed was the very finger of God. Unfortunately, despite admission and acceptance of a miracle, the idolaters still did not consent to emancipate the Jewish peoples. And why? Why do you think that happened? It is because even the idolatrous clergymen knew that all the things which work are not necessarily right. Why? Because for the idolaters, God or God's miracles or approval could be good or not good. In fact, for the idolaters, gods could be good gods or bad gods. So, according to the idolaters, a misguided God could have been behind the miracles. So, they decided to ignore Moses' miracles, even though they were sanctioned by God. So, coming back to the question, if something works, does it mean that it is right? The answer is obviously no. There are multiple factors at work here. If something works, we must ask, for example, is it working through good means or through incorrect means? There are multiple examples of profitable ventures which are illegal or immoral or injurious to stakeholders. For example, you may have a false marketing campaign that may work in the short run and maybe even profitable, but it can be injurious to stakeholders in the long run. Similarly, a mafia can be an enterprise that is very profitable, but mafias, as we know, engage in immoral, unethical, illegal behavior. So let's once again reconsider the saying, if it works, it must be okay. Well, let's think over evidence based management, what works based on hard facts and data or empiricism versus what is moral. Let us consider what seems expeditious or expedient or practical versus what is right. In the short run, what seems pragmatic and what is moral are not identical in the short run. What seems pragmatic or what works may be a superset of that which is moral. This is the case in the short run, right? Now, in the long run, what is moral and pragmatic, expedient and empirically correct are identical. And that should be the case. But unfortunately, most people don't know what will work in the long run, and they may confuse what works in the short run for divine approval. In conclusion, empiricism may be for verifying the veracity and power of the moral injunction. Empiricism does not replace moral injunction.